The Sea of Japan looked calm that morning. Too calm. At 10:42 a.m., the crew aboard the American destroyer USS Porter expected another routine patrol through disputed waters. The sun was bright. Visibility was perfect. Sailors moved across the deck like they had done 100 times before. Radar operators monitored nearby traffic. Marines joked quietly over comms. Nothing seemed unusual. Then the radar screen exploded with contacts. One ship appeared first, then 5, then 10 more. Within seconds, the entire display turned red. 35 North Korean warships were moving into formation from every direction. Not random movement, not intimidation, a trap. The officers on the bridge watched in silence as the circle tightened around them. Ships from the north, ships from the east, ships from the west. Fast attack patrol boats, missile corvettes, aging Soviet-built frigates packed together into a coordinated ring surrounding the American destroyer. Every escape route vanished. The USS Porter sat directly in the center, 2 miles wide. Complete encirclement. Captain James Mitchell stepped toward the tactical display without saying a word. He studied the pattern for only a few seconds before realizing something terrifying. This operation had been planned for weeks. The North Koreans weren't trying to scare them away. They were trying to capture an American warship in broad daylight. Around the bridge, the mood changed instantly. Conversations stopped. Marines grabbed helmets and body armor. Weapons crews rushed toward combat stations below deck. Alarm sirens echoed through the ship as sailors sprinted through narrow steel corridors. Battle stations, this is not a drill. The announcement hit every compartment on board. 260 Americans suddenly understood the same thing at the exact same moment. They were alone and heavily outnumbered. A nearby radar operator swallowed hard as more enemy signals appeared on screen. "Captain, all contacts confirmed hostile." Mitchell kept his eyes on the formation. The North Korean ships were positioning themselves carefully, almost perfectly. No panic, no confusion. Whoever commanded the operation knew exactly what they were doing. Then, the radio crackled. A calm voice spoke in English. "American destroyer USS Porter. This is Admiral Park Chol-min of the Democratic People's Republic Navy." The bridge fell silent. "You are completely surrounded by 35 armed naval vessels. Escape is impossible. Resistance is pointless. You will lower your flag, stop engines, and prepare to surrender immediately." A pause followed. Then came the part that changed everything. "You have 5 minutes to comply. If you refuse, your ship will be destroyed." The countdown had started. On the bridge, nobody moved. Some sailors stared at the radio speaker. Others looked toward Captain Mitchell, waiting for an order that could decide whether all of them lived or died. Because the truth was brutal. The USS Porter was powerful. One of the most advanced destroyers in the world, equipped with missiles, advanced radar systems, close-range defense weapons, and highly trained Marines. But 35 ships? That was different. Even the best destroyer on Earth could be overwhelmed if attacked from every direction at once. Mitchell immediately contacted Pacific Command. "Porter to Pacific Fleet. We are surrounded by 35 North Korean warships. Enemy demanding surrender. Request immediate support." Static answered first. Then a voice finally returned. "USS Ronald Reagan Strike Group responding now. Estimated arrival 40 minutes. 40 minutes. The bridge crew exchanged stunned looks. They had been given 5. Mitchell leaned over the tactical map again. The enemy formation continued tightening slowly around them, like a noose closing inch by inch. One young sailor near the communication station whispered something under his breath. 40 minutes. We're not making 40 minutes. Nobody answered him, because nobody knew if they would survive the next 4. Outside, the North Korean ships continued moving closer. Their guns were visible now. Missile launchers aimed directly toward the Porter from every angle. Some enemy sailors could even be seen standing along their decks, watching the American destroyer through binoculars, waiting, watching, expecting surrender. Another transmission came through. 3 minutes remaining. The pressure on board the Porter became unbearable. Some Marines checked ammunition in silence. Others wrote quick messages to family members that would probably never send if the ship went down. Below deck, engine crews pushed the destroyer to maximum combat readiness while damage control teams prepared for incoming fires and flooding. Everyone aboard understood what was happening. If negotiations failed, the Sea of Japan was about to become a graveyard. But then something unexpected happened. For a few seconds, nobody on the North Korean ships reacted. They thought the American captain was bluffing. 35 warships surrounded a single destroyer, every angle covered. every weapon aimed directly at the USS Porter. From Admiral Park's perspective, the battle was already over. The Americans were supposed to panic. Instead, Captain Mitchell was preparing to attack. Inside the North Korean command ship, confusion spread across the bridge. One officer leaned toward Park nervously. "Sir, the destroyer is activating missile systems." Park narrowed his eyes. Impossible. No captain would willingly start a fight against impossible odds. Not here. Not trapped inside a complete encirclement. But then alarms exploded across multiple North Korean vessels at the exact same moment. Missile lock warnings. The USS Porter had officially gone weapons hot. On the American destroyer, Marines rushed across the deck as missile crews finalized targeting data. The atmosphere on board had completely changed. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Adrenaline. Purpose. The countdown no longer mattered. The decision had already been made. A young weapons officer looked toward Captain Mitchell one final time. Targets confirmed. Mitchell didn't hesitate. Fire. The destroyer erupted instantly. 8 Harpoon anti-ship missiles blasted into the sky, one after another, leaving trails of smoke across the bright morning air. The launch shook the entire ship as the missiles climbed upward before dropping low over the ocean surface. North Korean radar systems screamed. Enemy officers froze. Because the missiles weren't spreading randomly across the formation, they were heading directly toward command vessels. Mitchell had identified the most important ships in the entire circle within seconds. The fleet leaders, the communication hubs, the coordination centers holding the operation together. He wasn't trying to destroy 35 ships immediately, he was trying to blind them. And it worked perfectly. The first impact slammed into a North Korean command frigate near the eastern sector of the formation. A massive fireball ripped through the bridge, sending debris high into the air. Seconds later, another explosion erupted across the western line, then another, then another. The ocean shook violently as 8 separate command ships burst into flames almost simultaneously. Communication towers collapsed, radar systems vanished, entire bridges disappeared in seconds. The organized encirclement instantly turned into chaos. Admiral Park grabbed the sides of his console as warning alarms screamed around him. Re-establish formation now! But it was already too late. Without command coordination, the North Korean fleet began falling apart. Some ships accelerated forward, others turned away suddenly. Several captains started firing without orders, and in the middle of the confusion, one North Korean patrol boat accidentally launched rockets directly into another Allied vessel. Friendly fire. Panic spread immediately. Smoke poured across the ocean as crews screamed over overlapping radio frequencies trying to figure out who was still alive. The perfect circle was collapsing, and Captain Mitchell saw the opening instantly. Main gun ready? Yes, Captain. Then let's finish breaking them. The USS Porter turned hard toward the northern section of the formation. Its massive 5-inch deck gun rotated into position. Then it opened fire. The first shell crossed the water in seconds before tearing straight through the upper structure of a North Korean corvette. Metal exploded outward as flames burst through the side of the ship. A second round followed immediately, then a third. The destroyer fired with terrifying speed. Boom, boom, boom! Each shot slammed into enemy vessels while the Porter maneuvered aggressively through the collapsing formation. North Korean sailors who expected surrender were suddenly fighting for survival. And the worst part? The Americans were getting more dangerous every second. Admiral Park stared across the burning water in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. 35 ships against one destroyer should have ended in minutes. Instead, his fleet was losing control of the battle almost immediately. Then, another officer shouted from across the bridge, "Sir, multiple vessels reporting severe damage." Park clenched his fists. "Close the circle, move all ships inward, crush them with numbers." At first, the order sounded smart. Overwhelm the destroyer at close range, box it in completely, destroy it through sheer pressure. But that command would become the biggest mistake of the entire battle, because the closer those ships moved toward the USS Porter, the deadlier the destroyer became. And within the next few minutes, the Sea of Japan would turn into absolute hell.
The remaining North Korean ships pushed forward together. Through smoke and burning debris, the fleet tightened around the USS Porter again. Warships cut through the water from every direction, trying to overwhelm the destroyer before American reinforcements could arrive. From a distance, it looked terrifying. 19 enemy ships advancing at once, missile launchers armed, deck guns firing, rocket trails streaking across the sky. The ocean around the porter exploded with incoming fire. Water towers crashed over the deck as shells landed dangerously close. Warning alarms screamed through the destroyer while sailors fought to keep systems online. One missile slammed into the water only yards from the hull, shaking the entire ship violently. Lights flickered on board. A damage control officer grabbed the radio. "Minor flooding lower compartments, containing now." But Captain Mitchell barely reacted, because he was waiting for the enemy to make one final mistake, and they just did. The North Korean ships had moved too close, way too close. On the porter's deck, a weapons operator suddenly looked up from his targeting screen. "Captain, they're entering CIWS range." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Activated." Seconds later, one of the deadliest defense systems ever mounted on a warship came alive. The Phalanx CIWS, a fully automated close-range weapon system designed to destroy incoming missiles at insane speed. But missiles weren't the only thing it could hit. The rotating gun system locked onto the nearest enemy vessel automatically. Then the firing started. The sound was unreal. A violent mechanical roar ripped across the ocean as the Phalanx unleashed thousands of rounds per minute. Streams of tracer fire tore through the air like solid beams of light. The closest North Korean patrol boat was shredded instantly. Metal ripped apart, windows exploded outward. Crew members dove for cover as the ship lost control and slammed sideways into another vessel nearby. The CIWS immediately shifted targets again. Another stream of rounds tore through a second ship's bridge, then another, then another. The system moved faster than human reaction, precise, relentless, merciless. Within seconds, entire sections of the North Korean assault line collapsed into flames. Admiral Park watched in horror as ships that had survived the missile strike suddenly started disintegrating at close range. "This is impossible," one officer whispered. But things were getting even worse. The USS Porter wasn't fighting alone anymore. Every Marine on board had joined the battle. Heavy machine guns opened fire from multiple positions across the destroyer. American sailors fired non-stop toward enemy bridges, exposed missile crews, and weapon stations. The noise became deafening. Gunfire, explosions, sirens, screaming metal. Smoke covered the ocean so heavily that some North Korean captains could barely see the ships beside them. And inside that chaos, the Porter kept moving. Sharp turns, sudden acceleration, perfect timing. The destroyer weaved through incoming fire while returning overwhelming force from every weapon system still operational. Then another explosion rocked the ship, this one closer, much closer. A North Korean missile finally connected with the Porter's outer hull near the rear section. The blast threw several sailors off their feet instantly. Fire erupted along part of the deck as emergency teams rushed toward the damage. For the first time in the battle, the destroyer had been hit directly. One communications officer looked toward Mitchell. "Captain, we're taking damage fast." Mitchell stared through the smoke at the remaining enemy vessels. 7 ships still operational, still dangerous, still closing in. But something had changed. The North Korean fleet no longer looked confident. Now they looked desperate. Several ships were already trying to pull away from the battle zone. Others drifted through the water, burning uncontrollably. The hunters were becoming survivors. And Captain Mitchell knew this was the moment to end it. He turned toward the weapons crew. "How many Tomahawks left?" 12 ready to fire." Mitchell looked back at the tactical display. 7 enemy ships. One chance to finish this completely. Then he gave the order. "Launch all remaining missiles." The crew froze for half a second. All of them? At once? Mitchell never blinked. "End this now." And seconds later, the USS Porter unleashed the attack that would completely erase the North Korean fleet from the Sea of Japan. The USS Porter shook violently as the missile cells opened. One after another, Tomahawk cruise missiles blasted into the sky with thunderous force. Flames erupted from the launch system, while thick smoke rolled across the destroyer's deck. Every remaining North Korean captain saw the launch, and every single one realized the same terrifying thing at the exact same moment. The Americans were not trying to survive anymore. They were trying to wipe out the entire fleet. "Multiple missiles inbound!" Panic spread instantly across the surviving ships. Some captains ordered evasive maneuvers. Others tried retreating north. A few desperate crews launched everything they had left toward the Porter, hoping to cripple the destroyer before the missiles arrived. But it was too late. The Tomahawks dropped low over the ocean's surface and accelerated directly toward their targets. The first impact hit a damaged frigate attempting to escape the battle zone. The explosions split the ship almost completely in half. Burning debris shot hundreds of feet into the air as sailors jumped into the freezing water below. A second missile struck another vessel near the engine compartment. The blast triggered secondary explosions instantly. Fuel ignited, ammunition detonated. Within seconds, the entire ship disappeared behind a wall of fire. Across the battlefield, explosions erupted one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The Sea of Japan transformed into a burning graveyard. North Korean ships that had surrounded the USS Porter less than 30 minutes earlier were now sinking beneath black smoke and shattered steel. One patrol boat tried turning away at full speed. A Tomahawk caught it seconds later. Gone. Another vessel attempted launching its final anti-ship missile. The American strike destroyed the launcher before the missile even fired. Gone. Another ship drifted helplessly through the smoke after losing power. Seconds later, another explosion erased it from the water completely. Gone. On the bridge of the Porter, sailors watched the destruction unfold in stunned silence. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. They were too exhausted, too shocked. Because only minutes earlier, every person on board believed they might die inside that circle. Now, the circle itself was disappearing. Captain Mitchell studied the tactical screen carefully. One by one, enemy contacts vanished. 6 remaining, then 4, then 2, finally, 0. The last North Korean vessel burned for several moments before slowly rolling sideways into the ocean. Then it disappeared beneath the water completely. The battle was over. 35 warships had entered the encirclement, not one survived. For several seconds, the only sound across the bridge came from warning alarms and heavy breathing. Then, a radar officer spoke quietly. "Captain, no remaining hostile contacts." Nobody moved. It didn't feel real. The ocean around them burned with floating wreckage and black smoke rising into the sky. Pieces of destroyed ships drifted through the waves, while secondary explosions echoed in the distance. The USS Porter had survived something impossible. But Captain Mitchell knew the crisis wasn't finished yet. Because this attack had not been random. It had been planned, organized, approved. Which meant, somewhere beyond the horizon, North Korean naval command centers were still operational, still capable of launching another attack. Then the radio crackled again. "Porter, this is Pacific Fleet Command." Mitchell grabbed the receiver. "Go ahead." The response came immediately. "Outstanding work, Porter. Carrier strike group 7 minutes out. Additional destroyers inbound from the south." Mitchell looked back toward the burning ocean. "Understood." But then the Admiral continued. "And Captain, new orders just authorized." The bridge grew silent. "Satellite intelligence confirmed 7 naval bases supported the ambush operation against your vessel. Command centers, missile storage sites, submarine docks, fuel depots." A pause followed. Then came the order. "Destroy all of them." Several sailors looked up instantly. This battle wasn't ending, it was escalating, fast. Within minutes, American reinforcements finally appeared on radar. 2 additional destroyers entered the area alongside fighter aircraft roaring overhead from the USS Ronald Reagan strike group. For the first time all morning, the Porter was no longer alone. But the mood across the American ships had changed completely. This was no longer a defensive operation, it was retaliation. Coordinates for 7 North Korean naval facilities appeared across tactical displays almost immediately. Wonsan, Nampo, Myangdo. Submarine facilities, missile depots, fleet headquarters, every location connected to the ambush. Every location now marked for destruction. On board the American destroyers, missile crews prepared another strike package.
Hours after the battle ended, smoke still covered parts of the Sea of Japan. American rescue helicopters moved carefully above the freezing water, while damaged pieces of the North Korean fleet drifted below. Burning fuel spread across the waves. Twisted metal floated everywhere. The ocean looked less like a battlefield and more like the aftermath of a disaster no one thought was possible. Inside the USS Porter, exhaustion finally started hitting the crew. For nearly an hour,
Every sailor and Marine on board had operated on pure adrenaline. Now, reality was settling in. The ship had survived, barely. Damage control teams moved through darkened hallways, inspecting fires, flooded compartments, and shattered equipment. Parts of the destroyer's outer hull were scorched black from missile impacts. Several communication systems were offline. One rear weapon section had been nearly destroyed. But the ship was still moving, still armed, still operational. And that fact alone stunned military analysts later. Because according to every normal calculation, the USS Porter should have been sunk within the first 10 minutes. 35 ships against one destroyer wasn't supposed to become a victory story. It was supposed to become a warning. Instead, it became a nightmare for North Korea. Far away in Pyongyang, military leadership watched incoming reports in disbelief. At first, commanders thought there had been a communication failure. Then they believed American aircraft must have arrived early. But as satellite feeds updated, the truth became impossible to deny. The fleet was gone. Completely gone. One by one, reports stopped coming from surviving ships because there were no surviving ships left. Then came the second disaster, the naval bases. Entire sections of coastal military infrastructure had been erased within minutes. Fuel depots burned uncontrollably. Dockyards collapsed. Missile storage facilities detonated from secondary explosions powerful enough to shake nearby towns. One intelligence officer reportedly said the same sentence over and over while staring at the tactical screen. How did one destroyer do this? But the answer wasn't really about one ship. It was about preparation, training, coordination, and one decision that changed everything: refusing surrender. Back on the USS Porter, Captain Mitchell finally walked alone onto the outer deck as the sun began lowering across the horizon. The battle was over. The firing had stopped. For the first time all day, silence returned to the sea. Several sailors nearby watched him quietly. To them, Mitchell no longer looked like a normal commanding officer. He looked like the man who had stared at impossible odds and attacked anyway. One young Marine sitting near the damaged rail finally broke the silence. "Captain?" Mitchell looked toward him. The Marine shook his head slowly while staring out at the burning wreckage floating across the water. "I thought we were dead." A few nearby sailors laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because everyone on board had thought the exact same thing. Mitchell leaned against the side of the destroyer for a moment before answering. So did they. The crew around him smiled for the first time all day. But thousands of miles away, the political fallout was only beginning. News of the battles spread across the world within hours. Emergency broadcasts interrupted television programming. Military analysts flooded news networks. Satellite images of destroyed North Korean ships appeared everywhere. And almost immediately, one question dominated every discussion. Why would North Korea try something this risky in the first place? Some believed the operation was designed as political theater that spiraled out of control. Others believed North Korean commanders genuinely thought the Americans would surrender rather than risk open conflict. But most experts agreed on one thing. They completely underestimated the USS Porter, and they completely misunderstood the people on board. Because what happened in the Sea of Japan wasn't just about weapons systems or missile technology, it was psychological. The North Korean strategy depended on fear. The entire operation was built around intimidation. Surround the destroyer, overwhelm it visually, force surrender before fighting even begins. And honestly, against many crews it might have worked. But on that particular morning, they encountered something different. A captain who refused humiliation, a crew trained for chaos, and Marines who had already accepted the possibility of dying before the first missile ever launched. That changes people. That changes battles. Years later, military academies would reportedly study the encounter as an example of how quickly overwhelming numerical superiority can collapse once coordination disappears. Because once the command ships were destroyed, the battle was already over. The R.